You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kalynn Bayron, who I always want to call Kalynn Bayron. This is the first Kalynn Bayron book I've read, even though I own this one. I haven't read it yet because it's a series. I've heard good things about it, and I'm reading a different physical book right now. Anyway, I do think I like this author so far from what I've seen. This isn't a perfect book, but I liked it for the most part. So this is a YA horror slasher. Our main character is Charity. She is a 17-year-old girl who works at this immersive horror experience. So she spends the summers working at this camp, but it's not a camp, it is the site where a movie was filmed that was a very classic teenage summer camp slasher horror film where everyone dies. That's what this spot is famous for, and people come here to get the sort of experience, the slasher experience. And she plays the final girl, who is the one who survives the night and tries to help the guests survive from the killer. Her classmate Kyle is the killer, and they have like secret tunnels under the camp that let him, pop around and show up and chase the guests. And then all the other staff members play like victim number one and, the receptionist who dies and things like that. So that's kind of a cool setting. Charity really likes doing this, but at the very end of the summer, a couple of people have left, have disappeared. Classic no-shows, she thinks. People who just leave because they're a bunch of flaky teenagers, and they're like living at this campground for the summer, and so people don't enjoy it, and so they left. The remaining staff is short-staffed, and Charity calls her girlfriend and a couple of her friends to come out and help them finish off the remaining couple of nights at this horror experience. Then they start hearing strange noises, and strange things keep happening, and there's a dead owl, and things in the lake that shouldn't be in the lake, and doors that are open that should not be open, and horror shenanigans. I won't get into spoilers. That's where we'll end the plot summary, for the most part. So I really like the setup. I think it has a really strong start, and I think it has a lot of tension and sort of anticipation, and there's a lot of these little moments of like spooky things happening, and you're like, oh, who did that? What's that? There's a lot of mystery. I think those initial slow burn horror elements are the most successful horror elements of this, barring some moments in the like climactic scenes. I listened to this on audiobook, and I think the audiobook narrator did a good job getting into the emotions of like being chased by a killer, and in this very harrowing situation where people are dying and there's a lot on the line. It's very high stakes. But I still think those little moments of tension are like my favorite part of this, or like was the part I was most enjoying, because I didn't know where it was going to go, and like I wanted to know what was happening. I won't spoil anything, but this book didn't quite go the route I thought it was going to take. I thought we were going to go like full slasher, like just someone's just trying to murder them because there are a bunch of kids at a summer camp. It's not really that. I guess that's kind of a spoiler. This goes sort of in a paranormal direction, slightly. It's not crazy paranormal, but I guess it is paranormal. And then there's like some cult stuff, which is really cliche. I didn't really love the villain or villains in this. Again, I don't want to say any spoilers, but it just didn't go exactly where I expected it to, because it was set up really as like a slasher, because that's what the movie is, like some serial killer goes crazy and kills people. And it simultaneously wasn't that simple, but also the story we got just wasn't that complex. Again, it was very tropey, very typical of the genre, but in a really like ham-fisted, not really interesting way, which was kind of disappointing. My least favorite scene in this is a scene with a minor antagonist. I guess this book's kind of hard to talk about without full spoilers, but I'm not gonna go full spoilers because I think this is a plot-based book. Like, you want to see what happens and like what the mystery is and what all's going on, and it does take like several twists and like turns, and it keeps going different directions, and you're never quite entirely sure who the killer is, and and things like that. So I'm definitely not spoiling everything, but I will get some spoilers here. There's a crazy lady with a gun who harasses them pretty early on. She's like the first antagonist, I guess you could say, where she's like a neighbor to the property and she comes with a shotgun and is like, you kids are on my property, and like scares the shit out of them. There's a scene with her where she's like explaining the backstory of the land, which is relevant, but she says it. She tells this story in a super vague way, which you know is only told like that because it adds mystery to the story, and we as the audience still have all of these questions because she didn't really answer anything. And it's really just a plot device rather than how someone would actually tell this story. No human would actually talk like that and like that vaguely and that like mystically and metaphorically, and you wouldn't be here if you knew what I knew, and you know, really like talking around the actual point just to heighten the suspense, which is not realistic. It's something you kind of expect from a horror movie, but like a bad horror movie. And like the dialogue in that conversation is like not good. And then there's some dialogue with uh, the killer at the end. They're sort of talking about their motivations, but they're giving like an evil villain speech, and it's just real vague, and we don't like know that much about the character. And it's not it's horror movie tropes, but it's like bad horror movie tropes. And it's not fleshed out in the way you want. But I will say the very ending was cool and unique and like was not what I was expecting at all. And so there's definitely like a cool twist at the end here. And I wouldn't call this a bad book. There are parts that don't feel as fleshed out as they could be. The beginning part is the strongest, and it's sort of like the slowest pace. I don't want to say slow pace because I actually thought this was a pretty fast-paced novel. Like, we really get in there. The whole book takes place over just a couple of days, and a lot of that is the final day where they are fighting for their lives. And so it's a very short time frame of a novel, and that really lends itself to a good pace where things are happening. But I think the initial like build up to people dying does take a little while. Maybe in hindsight it feels too long, or maybe even in the moment it felt like it was taking too long. Like, I thought people were going to start dying sooner. Like in a slasher movie, like people start dying pretty quickly. But I guess this wasn't just a typical slasher movie. So I don't know. But I actually really enjoyed that suspenseful part where we had really no idea what was going on, and you can like just really come up with all these ideas and like wonder who it is and like which of these characters is responsible. That's the fun part of a horror novel, especially like a teenage slasher, is trying to guess who the killer is and why they're doing this and like what's going on. And so the back half of the novel where you have more of an idea of what's going on, but it's like not that interesting, that's kind of a letdown. But the first half's really strong. I like this group of friends. I liked their dynamic. There's a decent cast of characters here. There's like 6 or so of them. They're all kind of different. I liked all of them. They're all sort of interesting. They're not like the greatest characters of all time, but I think the main character's good enough because we're just in Charity's head for the whole book. And she works because she plays the final girl. That's her acting role. And so, of course, in a story like this, she's like, I'm the final girl. I'm gonna survive. That's my whole job. And she's also like brought her girlfriend here and brought her friend. And she's like, no, I gotta look out for these people. I gotta save everyone. I'm the final girl. And like, I'm responsible for helping people and saving the guests. And now I have to actually save people for real. So that's a cool gimmick. Gimmick has a bad connotation. But that's the premise, and it's a good hook, I guess, is a better word for that. And again, it's not like the most creative thing in the world, and this does deal with a lot of horror movie tropes and settings and characters, but I like it. I will say this felt a bit like she didn't plan out the whole novel beforehand. I think she had a premise and the characters and the setting, and she just kind of started writing and like getting into it in the first half, where you get a lot of character work and establishing of relationships in the setting. And then when it came time to do the actual like plot horror reveal, she just kind of panicked and then came up with something very cliche and didn't really think about it. I'm just speculating, but that's kind of what it feels like. Maybe she was writing this on a deadline. Maybe she just ran out of ideas and was like, this'll work. And that's the thing about this book. It does work. Parts are kind of cheesy, but like, that's what horror movies are. If you've seen horror movies, I've seen a lot of horror movies like this, where they're just like mass produced, very common, like low bar. They hit the mark, but they don't excel in any way. So the horror elements as a whole don't quite work for me. I mean, it works. I just said that, but it's not like fantastic. I think it could have been improved. I think if this author had had more time to ruminate on it, unless she did. Again, I'm speculating. I don't know when or why or where or how she wrote this book, but I think it could have been improved. And I think I like this book because I saw so much potential in it. I think I like this writer. Like, the prose was competent. It was just these story beats that sort of dip in quality a bit as the story goes on. So I think this is a competent writer. I think she could have done something really good here, which sort of makes this good in a way, even though it's not exactly what she wrote. But I am going to read her other books. She actually has a lot of other books. There's a lot of like, there's a Cinderella retelling and like maybe a Snow White retelling. I don't know. She did like fantasy stories, and then she's got like a fantasy romantasy series that I'm gonna read. So I am excited to see more from this author. I think her thing is she does Sapphic YA with Black protagonists, and so that's definitely something this does have going for it. Again, I liked these characters, and Charity especially. Like, she's a good main character, and her girlfriend is cute, and like, that's not really a big element. The romance is very minimal. My cat is very upset that I will not let her go outside in a thunderstorm. She would not survive a horror movie. So anyway, I do think this author has promise. I think this book had promise. I mean, you can't really improve the book. You're not gonna like edit and re-release the book and do anything different here. But it was fine for what it is. It's not like grand literature. It's not like a complete twist of the genre. It's nothing exceptional, but I think it's fine, and I think it's a cool Sapphic POC twist on a genre that isn't seen as much. That is something it does have going for it. And I would like to read more of this author's books. It's not a perfect book, but like pretty good. Pretty good. Not a terrible reading experience for sure. Again, in hindsight, I dislike some of the things that went on, but while I'm reading it, I'm like intrigued by the mystery, and I want to see what's coming, and I want to see what she's going to do with it, and I want to see the twists, and I want to see where she subverts things, or if she subverts things. Some things maybe don't get subverted in a way you expect, but some do. And so it's fun to read, pretty much. Actually had a real blast with like the first half of this audiobook. I was like really enjoying it in a way that I haven't enjoyed a book in a little bit, just based on what I'm reading lately. I've been reading like very slow-paced novels, and to have like a fast, simple teen thriller that takes place over just a couple of days and like is really like tight and enclosed, and you know, just the foundation is really well set up. That was very enjoyable to read. So a decent book.